Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, I think it's about time we get started here. It's like people are sort of trickling in. Wanted to start by welcoming everyone for coming. Welcome to OPAL's semi-annual fundraiser. I think we missed it last year because various situations that I'm sure you're all familiar with. But yeah, welcome to Movement of Movements. Happy to see you all here. A quick word on accessibility. We have ASL interpretation who will be spotlighted during the webinar, and closed captioning is also available. And yeah, like I said, this is usually, we do one of these fundraisers every year. We missed last year because of COVID, obviously, and this year we're, doing it virtually, which is kind of weird. It would be nice to be in actual space and community with everybody, but best practice for now is definitely to keep things virtual as much as possible, which is also good because it makes things more accessible in a lot of ways for folks who can't always attend physically in person. Moving on, I think I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Neighbors for Clean Air, Crag Law Center, 350 PDX, Apano, Rose Community Development, Seeding Justice, Welcome Home Coalition, Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility, Verde, Northwest Health Foundation, Beneficial State Bank, Portland Bee-Balm, Aiko Schaefer, Metro, and SEI Local 49. And with that, I'll introduce Tana Ashley Culbertson, who was a former board member on OPAL, who will be giving a land acknowledgement and grounding.
Waklisad, Gawasasis Tana, Nia Modakni, Choi Numu, Choi Karuk. Greetings, my name is Tana Ashley Culbertson. I'm a citizen of the Klamath Tribes and a descendant of the Modoc, Paiute, and Karuk peoples of Southern Oregon and Northern California. I've had the privilege of serving on OPAL's board and support their mission to create safer and healthier places for our communities to live, work, pray, learn, and play. I'm honored to join you this evening. I want to acknowledge that if we were meeting tonight in person, we would all have been on the unceded territory in Portland, Oregon. Instead, we're on the homelands of many tribal nations and are benefiting from their wise stewardship and knowledge of place. You can use this link to see whose homelands you are currently on. And if you type in native-land.ca, you'll be able to see where you are currently at. We acknowledge that the state of Oregon is comprised of the ancestral homelands, traditional village sites, and gathering areas of the Burns Paiute tribe, the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Confederated Tribes of Siletz, Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Indians, Coquel Indian Tribe, and the Klamath Tribes. We want to recognize that today, Oregon is a region of many diverse Native peoples who continue to live and work here. We respectfully acknowledge and honor all Indigenous communities, past, present, and future, and are grateful for their ongoing and vibrant presence. We honor the many nations of Oregon for being the original caretakers and protectors of these lands since time immemorial, and for passing on their teachings and life ways through past and present generations. I'd also like to provide a labor acknowledgement that was created by the National Education Association's Black Caucus. We pay homage to those stolen from Africa, placed in chattel bondage, forced into labor, and called slaves. They never submitted to this oppression and have always fought together with an unbroken connection to the divine and to each other. We honor our African ancestors for their forced and unpaid labor that built much of the Americas. To all our Indigenous, Asian, and African forebearers, we commit to the continued struggle for liberation and reparations, for it is through this and justice that we truly give honor. And now I would like to introduce to you OPAL's Executive Director, Hui Ong.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Tana. It is exciting to have so many join us tonight for tonight's celebration and panel discussion. For over 16 years, OPAL has built power for environmental justice and civil rights in our community. Organizing people and activating leaders has been core to the victories we have achieved. I'm honored to be part of this fabulous organization and the movement for environmental justice. Next slide. No movement organization can do it alone. We know many individuals and organizations play huge roles in fortifying environmental justice prior to OPAL's formation. I'd like to recognize two organizations in particular, the Environmental Justice Action Group and Sisters in Action for Power. The EJAG identified the need to organize in outer Southeast Portland, engaging a broader BIPOC constituency around environmental justice issues. And Sisters in Action organized, won, and defended the YouthPass program for Portland Public Schools, a campaign we have been honored to carry and fight to expand over the years. No 6 slides can be able to cover the breadth and depth of OPAL's victories and history, but wanted to share a few highlights to get us started. Early OPAL organizers, next slide, please. Early OPAL organizers worked with the Multnomah County Health Department on environmental health concerns facing public housing residents in North Portland, specifically around air quality. In that organizing, many of the residents expressed concerns related to transportation and transit access. And so OPAL pivoted towards transportation justice organizing and founded Bus Riders Unite, BRU, in 2009. Next slide. I'll just say, as we're waiting, that BRU is amazing and awesome. And in 2009, when we launched Bus Riders Unite, transit-dependent folks launched a campaign with many supporters to stop service cuts and win an increase in fare transfers by 30 minutes. Next slide. In 2013, OPAL wins a reduction in youth fares, and in 2015, a specifically selected youth cohort, ages 15 to 19, joined that year's Organizers in Training class. These leaders would go on and found OPAL's Environmental Justice Alliance, YEJA. YEJA develops 40+ youth annually in the art and science of organizing and the principles of environmental justice. YEJA, along with allies and supporters, won the expansion of YouthPass program to David Douglas and Park Rose High School. And we'll share more later about our continued effort to expand the program even further. OPAL also understood that organizing low-income, transit-dependent, and BIPOC communities will surface a lot of other needs and challenges. Housing justice became a focus for OPAL, and over many years, we forged a statewide coalition of more than 30 organizations that lifted the statewide ban on inclusionary zoning. Next slide. We also researched, activated the community to win the implementation of a low-income fare that give access to a $28 a month fare for low-income riders instead of $100 a month. Real impact on that changes the lives of our communities we organize. And as of March 2021, over 33,000 low-income riders have access to it. OPAL is proud to anchor the building of the Oregon Just Transition Alliance, and along with partners and allies, push to see significant climate legislation pass this legislative session. These victories will invest in rural and energy burdened communities and transition our electricity to 100% renewable by 2040. This is probably the time when if we were all together, we were all cheer and shout outs. But these are just some of the highlights. All of this amazing work is made possible by our members, supporters, allies, and an amazing staff. I will now pass the mic to one of those amazing staff, Kevin Aipopo, one of OPAL's fierce community organizers. Kevin?
Great, thank you, Hui. Thank you for highlighting all of the wonderful work done by OPAL over the past years. And talofa love, everyone. My name is Kevin Aipopo. I am the YEJA Community Organizer for OPAL Environmental Justice, and I use all pronouns. I have the wonderful privilege this evening of interviewing several panelists, including community members, program members, and supporters of OPAL. Those panelists include T. Getty, Peggy Shepard, Monica Atkins, and Ben Duncan. So I would say put your hands together, but maybe like tap lightly on your keyboards in support of all of them. And I'd like to begin with our first question for our panelists. And just as a quick reminder for accessibility, if you're not speaking, if you could please turn your camera off, that would be really helpful. But maybe starting with Ben, and we could just go popcorn style, if you'd feel comfortable telling us a little bit about yourself and what you are most proud of. And that can be in relation to work, to life, or however you'd like to interpret the question, but we'll hand it to Ben first.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate the flexibility in the way you frame the question. And I'll just start by saying I'm thankful for the opportunity to join this amazing panel and to join and celebrate the incredible work that OPAL and so many organizations do and continue to do to move environmental justice forward for our communities. You know, I'm sitting here in Syracuse, New York, which is where I grew up, visiting family, and I always start with my background as a person. My father's family's from Birmingham, Alabama. Black family moved to part of the Great Migration to Syracuse in 1950. My mother is a white Jewish woman from the Bronx in New York. And so my not just my professional work, but my personal identity has been shaped in large part by who I am. And so I start there. And I think, you know, it's a metaphor for the way that I approach the work. And I think what environmental justice has brought to many movements, and that is this connection and linkage, the bridge between the experiences of racism and the harms of institutional and systemic racism and what we experience from environmental hazard. You know, I moved to Oregon in 1997, studied environmental science. I had the incredible opportunity to be part of the Coalition Against Environmental Racism. That's where I met one of my first professors, Bob Collins, who taught me, really exposed me to environmental justice. His partner, wife, Professor Robin Morris Collins, were leading work around environmental racism. And that opportunity to start organizing and understanding environmental justice was really seminal to my growth. And that led to work ultimately with OPAL. My first job in the last 16 years, I've been with Multnomah County. I met Kevin Odell, who's the founding executive director of OPAL, on a bus talking about brownfields and the Environmental Justice Action Group that Huey mentioned earlier. Kevin left Multnomah County to form what is now OPAL. Didn't have a name at first, brought me on as a founding board member, and I took his title at the county, which was community connector, and Huey talked about some of the work we were doing in low-income housing, working with residents through a public health lens. And I spent years doing environmental policy work and had the great privilege over the last 7 years of being the Chief Diversity and Equity Officer for Multnomah County. I will say, I quit my job last Friday, so this will be the last time that I'm listed on a panel as being from Multnomah County, but it was an incredible opportunity to have. And I think, to Kevin's question around what of besides, when I turn off my camera, maybe you can see my beautiful wife, and I have a wonderful 10-year-old child. So I'm proud of the family and the child that we're raising. But I think, most from a work perspective, I'm really proud of being part of foundational work. Whether it was with OPAL, some of my community work with the Oregon Public Health Institute, Oregon Environmental Justice Task Force, Multnomah County. I think being part of work that is now being sustained and improved upon. And I've had a lot of opportunities to be there at the beginning. And I think that's been a real luxury and something I've been proud of, is watching the sustaining and the advancement of work that I was privileged to be a part of. So I'll stop there, but I appreciate the question and look forward to our conversation.
Wow, thank you so much, Ben. Really wonderful to hear some of your story and some of your family story, and to have someone who's so foundational to the work of OPAL be present with us this evening. So thank you for that. Moving forward, maybe Monica, if you feel comfortable sharing a little about yourself and something you're most proud of.
Absolutely. So peace, everybody. My name is Monica Atkins, and I'm one of the co-executive directors for the Climate Justice Alliance. And yeah, very excited to be here, getting an invitation from OPAL, who has definitely been showing a lot of leadership, I would say, within CJA, and their support in helping to build out some of the regional organizing strategies, and yeah, just their leadership in climate and environmental justice. Definitely want to just give a lot of gratitude for inviting me to speak here today. The things I'm most proud of, I was sitting here just thinking about that. I would have to say it would be, I would say my organizing, how I came into organizing, and the experiences that have shaped the way I organize. Coming from labor organizing, previously working with the United Auto Workers, working with the teachers union, so American Federation of Teachers, and as well the Communication Workers of America, where organizing state and government employees. There was a lot of, I think, critical skills that I got from organizing with the labor unions. Those are the technical skills of organizing, but also understanding the need for people to speak for themselves, and for workers to really be leading the solutions, and having control over those narratives. And so I feel my experience here at, working with our members at CJA has been one. Labor definitely, I think, primed me for that. But I also feel have just seen such a like dedication and commitment from our membership to really win the solutions, win just transitions for their communities. And yeah, I would say these are the experiences I've been most proud of, being welcomed into different communities like family, and being really sat down and given some of that like political grounding and understanding of the landscape of these communities. I think has really shaped my own understanding of like, being flexible with different approaches to organizing and understanding where folks are at a particular, when folks are in a particular place and how to move at the speed of that community and at the speed of trust. Um, yeah, I'm originally from Chicago and moved to Mississippi when I was 17. Went there for school, but also went there with the intention to organize, and knowing that that's one of the places where there's, it's kind of like the belly of the beast when it comes to organizing. And so I think I'm most proud of staying connected, like staying in that climate of organizing, and also like being able to take the leadership of the people in Mississippi and of those communities. Yeah, I would say those have been I think those are the things that I'm most proud of. And I guess moving also into just leadership with CJA, like these foundational things I think are essential to being able to listen and really take the feedback that folks are given as far as like how to move a strategy, when to move a strategy, and making sure that folks feel ownership of their strategy. So again, just really happy to be here and excited to be on this panel, learn more from the other folks that are here. Yeah, and just also want to like give a lot of gratitude too for the work that OPAL has done, and seeing the different bills that have gone forth in the wins and the legislative wins are really just inspiring and motivating. So yeah, just happy to be here, and I appreciate that question.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you for that gratitude. We are deeply excited to have you here as well. Really happy that you're able to share knowledge with us. And thank you for speaking to the importance of organizing and how that's been critical for your journey. Yeah, moving forward, Peggy, if you feel like you to have some space to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're most proud of.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful to have been invited from so far away to be part of the celebration that you all are having in Portland. So thank you for the invitation, and thank you for being part of a really dynamic environmental justice movement. And I know some of the people you've worked with. I haven't seen them in decades, but I remember when they were just starting out and coming to New York and the Northeast Environmental Justice Network. So it's just been so wonderful to have been able to connect with so many people around the country. So I'm Peggy Shepard. I'm co-founder and executive director of We Act for Environmental Justice. We have an office in Harlem, in New York City, and a federal policy office in Washington, D.C. I came to New York as a journalist and a magazine editor, and got involved in using my writing skills in political campaigns, working for the first Jesse Jackson for president campaign, and eventually getting a strong political mentor like Bill Lynch, who ran my campaign for Democratic District Leader, which I won in New York City, in West Harlem, and was elected, I guess, 3 or 4 times. But during that time, I understood that there were environmental issues that were making the community sick, and our residents and volunteers came to me and said it was my turn for a new generation of people to take political leadership. And so out of my Democratic Club, we began working on getting a sewage treatment plant to to be a healthier neighbor, to get the air emissions under control by organizing the community for 6 years, filing a lawsuit against the city, winning that settlement of the lawsuit, getting the plant fixed, and also getting a $1.1 million environmental benefits fund for the community. I was part of the 1991 Environmental Justice Leadership Summit that developed the 17 principles of environmental justice. And so I am very proud to have worked to continue to build the capacity of the national environmental justice movement over the last few decades. I'm proud to have been part of the leadership raising the visibility of these issues, not only in academic and government circles, but our local and state levels too, where we now see environmental justice advisory groups across so many states and so many cities. And now we see the Biden administration centering justice and equity in all government policies. And of course, that's visionary and it's optimistic, and it's up to us to help hold that commitment and that administration accountable. So over the years, evolving from, being the watchdog in the community to bringing good benefits, to doing solar installations to keep affordable housing affordable, doing worker training for our underemployed workers, working to engage the community into membership at WEACT and into engaging in policy making and decision making, and leading community residents in plans to develop a new waterfront park, which opened about 10 years ago, and developing a Northern Manhattan climate action plan in which we looked at the scenarios of extreme weather that might impact our community and what those solutions could be, and with the community coming out and saying energy security, energy democracy is our key priority. And as a result, working to implement those concerns and that priority. So thank you for inviting me today, and congratulations on another year's celebration.
Thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for all of your incredible work over the years. I think I can speak for everyone when I say we are deeply grateful to have you join us, and immensely proud to be continuing on the work that you've created so many foundations for. And now it's time for our final panelists to introduce themselves. T, if you feel comfortable telling us a little bit about yourself and what you're most proud of. Also, wonderful to see you. T is one of the YEJA fellows this past year, and we got to spend a lot of time together, and I'm so happy that she's here tonight.
Thanks for having me. So my name is T. Getty. I'm 17 years old and I go to David Douglas High School, so I'm pretty young. One of my passions is, like, of course, environmental justice and feminism. I've been really dedicated to fighting for gender, justice since I was middle school, because I realized misogyny at a very young age. And I'm really proud of joining YEJA. It really got me out of my shell and taught me more about organizing, and I built connections. So that's one thing that I'm really proud of, especially since I'm pretty young and new to organizing. Being a part of YEJA was a huge step, like phone banking and pushing for a ballot, for a measure, should I say, my apologies, was really, it was really worthwhile. And I'm also proud of the design we made. And in the design, we did mention the start of YouthPass, and it's just nice to be in a space with all these people like Peggy. That was really, cool to hear about you. So yeah, that's all I have to say so far. Thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you, T. Thank you for introducing yourself. It's so wonderful that you're here, and you're such an incredible leader. I'm so happy that you were part of YEJA. So just a reminder, the panel will be continuing for a little over 20 minutes. And everyone will get to answer 2 more questions. So we'll have to go through things a little quicker than we typically like to, just as a reminder for our panelists. But circling back around to the beginning, I have a question for Ben specifically. I'm wondering, how have you seen the environmental justice movement shift since you helped found OPAL?
I love this question, and I was glad to have some time to reflect on it. And I'll try to be brief, even though it's like reflecting on half of my lived life. But I think what I will say, and I'll start kind of going back to the late '90s when I arrived in Oregon. I mentioned the Coalition Against Environmental Racism. We used to throw a conference, and at that time we were bringing people in from elsewhere. Right. I think about, the work that We Act was doing. We were flying people in from New York and from Louisiana and Richmond, California and Houston, Texas. We were taking people from everywhere. Right. And because we didn't have a lot of foundation here, even though we did have some of the predecessors to OPAL that Hui mentioned, like Environmental Justice Action Group and Sisters in Action for Power. What I think what I would say is maybe 3 big bullet points. What I saw in the early 2000s in particular is that EJ was really limited and I think divided between maybe EJ and what we might call mainstream environmental groups. But also orgs, honestly, who were doing work in housing or education, public health, social justice work, that were not really framing the work in the ways that EJ has. And I think what we've seen in the last years is the type of intersectional organizing that I think OPAL really represents. Right, when you're thinking about just transition, the work that's happening in climate change, et cetera, right? And so I've seen this real framing and it lifts up and connects the values of environmental justice, right? Recognizing that, the results of institutional and systemic racism leaves disparate impact, that, as EJ folks say, right, communities that speak for themselves best protect themselves. So people need to have voices, those closest to the problem need to be closest to the solutions. Right, that we needed to see leadership, authentic leadership, power in communities of color that are going to. I've seen this shift over the last couple of decades of that becoming a reality, and that includes the environmental movement, right? What I might call the mainstream environmental movement, right? That is now, I think, fully recognized environmental justice as a core tenet of environmental work in every aspect, right? You can't do climate work without EJ. You can't do housing work without EJ. I would argue you can't do criminal justice work without understanding the relationship of where people live and what they experience. You can't do air quality work, can't do transportation, et cetera. And so I think we've seen this emergence of EJ. Not that I would say it's necessarily mainstream, but it's getting closer. And I think it's that recognition that EJ encompasses and connects all of this work in really remarkable ways. And then finally, and I think Miss Peggy really named this, what I've seen at the legislative level, both at a national, state, and local, both through the lenses of equity, but also environmental justice, is that EJ is a critical value, it's a critical practice, it's a critical framework for doing that work. And finally, the last thing I'll say and pass it back, I think I've had the luxury over the last 20 years or so of kind of aging both within and alongside a movement. And it's such a privilege to be able to see kind of where we were in the 90s and early 2000s and where the work is now. And, being able to kind of be a part of that, you get to see all the successes and imagine all the possibilities for the future. So super excited, and we could talk for hours about where the movement is and where it's going. But it was great to be able to reflect on that a little bit. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you so much for sharing with us, Ben. Those are some really beautiful reflections. And yeah, it's really wonderful to hear about that journey. I think we got a little glimpse into the growth you've seen and experienced. And for speaking to the intersectional nature of the work, right? I think it is really apparent to a lot of us that EJ is intersectional and it has to be. But you're right in stating that that wasn't the conversation always. So thank you for those notes. Moving forward, Monica, I wanted to ask you, what is the potential that you see in integrating culture and arts into environmental and climate justice organizing spaces?
Well, thanks, Kevin, for that question. Yeah, I think when it comes to like the integration of culture and arts, I would say that those things are kind of like have already been happening in just the ways that like grassroots communities organize in general. I've been seeing this with the communities that I organize with the Climate Justice Alliance, and probably have, since I've been here, and I'm sure I've been doing this before, but I see it in the care that's put into different meals, that reflects the culture of that community. I see it in, the values. I see it in the songs, the ceremonies, groundings, even the ways that we, today grounded and gave acknowledgement to the lands that the lands that those communities have been in, and just being really grounded in acknowledgement and the sacredness of that community. And in some of these ways that folks have been doing that, what I have been seeing as far as like outcomes and the ways that folks have been organizing through culture and arts have been like the deepening of relationships, ability to navigate different tensions within a community, and being able to uphold that sacredness and caring that go and intention that goes into organizing. Um, and I definitely think like our stories, the cultures, the traditions and relationships, that's what will sustain us and, remain when everything else is gone and, everything is said and done. So I do think there's a lot of potential for national organizations, for alliances, for movements to continue to take the leadership of the ways that grassroots have been organized, and then really create intentional spaces where organizers and artists, and cultural workers, healers, the different ways that culture is expressed, like creating those spaces for folks to come together so that folks can create strategies to really understand cultures, and I would say like the sacredness across communities. To get us stronger and to be able to build power. So I think like folks have been doing this already, and from a national standpoint, and like for our movement to really be taking note and of the ways that has been happening, and do our best to also incorporate that in the way that we organize and create space and make space for the joy and the resilience.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those insights. It's really beautiful. I have a good friend named Chris Mincy who always says that the relationships are the work. And I think a lot of what you just shared is really a testament to the ways that we have to incorporate ourselves into what we're doing in really authentic ways, or else we won't be able to not only sustain the work, but perform it in the first place, right? So thank you for sharing those insights, Monica. Peggy, a question for you. As the current co-chair of the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, we're wondering, how do you see federal government, or excuse me, federal environmental justice work connecting with local movements for environmental, social, and racial justice?
Yeah, we're a strong membership-based organization in Harlem, working to build a strong base. That was our mandate after the first People of Color Environmental Summit, to go home and build a broad base of support. And certainly that is what we have done. So, when you're organizing people around policies and initiatives that help them create a healthy and sustainable community, you certainly realize that really can't happen without looking at the policies that are obstacles or that can be more protective, that we have to help develop at a city, state, and federal level. And of course, we understand that the federal government devolves so much of their authority and their resources to states who administer a variety of environmental programs. So we certainly begin to understand that we have to operate at all levels of government in order to ensure a more sustainable community, and to ensure that the most affected residents are at the table and having their voices heard and can make a difference and create change. So it's been certainly gratifying that the Biden administration has really promoted centering justice and equity in all government policies. That's a very lofty ambition, and they are working to try to implement that and realize that ambition. And certainly at the White House Environmental Justice Advisory Council, as a member and co-chair, I'm certainly working, as I know others are, to ensure that we hold government accountable and that we make recommendations and advise them as well as we can. We understand that the Justice 40 program that the Biden administration has embraced, that 40% of the benefits of energy investments would go to frontline communities, which will be identified by a climate and economic screening tool. So the federal government will be able to identify where the frontline communities are, and then are working and have given a guidance to 21 federal agencies on how they should think about their programming in ways that will plan and advance environmental justice concerns, and that they should begin to develop budgetary issues around the enhancements for Justice 40 as well. And so all of that is just getting underway, creating that infrastructure to be able to measure, evaluate, and identify equity issues in agency planning. And then it becomes a whole nother phase, because it's certainly an important phase to get government to recognize these issues and to invest. But now we've got to ensure, as in our states and localities, that that investment comes to the communities for which it was intended. So that is going to require us really advocating at our local and state levels. Right now, if you were to have all of those elected officials and appointed officials in one room and ask if they'd heard of Justice 40, hardly any hands would go up. Yet there's the potential for multi-millions of dollars to be coming into your state and city for environmental justice communities. But as we know, it's not enough for that money to get out. It's got to get to the right place. And so it's going to really count on all of us to be the advocates, to develop vehicles like an equity review committee or Justice 40 review group to ensure that the city is being transparent, the state's being transparent, and how much money is being allocated, and how those projects are being implemented. Are they being implemented through developers or small businesses that have no relationship to that particular frontline community? So we're thinking that you should mandate, the federal government should mandate that any locality that gets funds must have an environmental justice review team, and that any entity that receives a grant should be in partnership with a community organization in that frontline community where the money is targeted. So there are so many ways that federal work connects with our local movements for environmental, social, and racial justice. And so much of it is, how do we invest? Because we know our communities have had massive, decades-long disinvestment. And so now that there's that potential, we have to seize this opportunity, and we have got to make our advocacy count now as if it never has before, because there's a real opportunity to change and transform the conditions in so many of our communities that are desperate for jobs, that are just desperate for investment and economic development. So I hope we're all going to be holding government accountable, having our eyes open, being innovative with our recommendations, and fierce in our accountability. So thank you for that question.
Yes, thank you so much for your powerful response. I really deeply appreciate all of the things you shared, especially these pieces around accountability and the different things that y'all are doing to help uphold and enforce accountability. I also appreciate this like call to action towards people, towards us, to find our way to be involved in our localities, especially since environmental justice and climate justice can feel so large at times that people have a difficult time saying, where's my place in this? But I think through the words you just shared with us, a lot of folks are starting to resonate with that and find their own place. So thank you so much. Finally, coming back to T, when you were talking a little about yourself, you shared some of your organizing experience around gender justice and then some of your experiences with YEJA. And I wanted to ask, what is your vision around organizing and the intersections between environmental justice and gender justice?
Well, oops, I forgot to share my video on, sorry. Well, honestly, I found this question amazing, and I feel like it's fitting for the stuff we talked about in YEJA when I was mentioning like woman slash femme slash non-binary like self-identifying buses, because transportation is a part of environmental justice. And I thought this question over, and I decided to like share my thoughts on the notes. So I'll just read that out loud because I feel like it really captures how I feel and what I mean. Climate injustice and gender injustice go hand in hand, so we obviously can't talk about one while ignoring the other. My vision around organizing and the intersections between environmental justice and gender justice is that we amplify women's voices and put them at the forefront of conversations. Since transportation is a part of environmental justice, one idea that I brought up frequently was women-only buses, and it would be self-identifying and not just women, so it'd be like inclusive. And lots of women share stories of being followed / harassed on the bus. So coming up with a way for a woman to safely navigate their area should be a focus. Other focuses should be housing for women who are like leaving places that have been hit with natural disasters, just leaving violent situations, and free food and water and like much more. And it's important to highlight that climate injustice affects women heavily, and women do a lot of farming and architectural work.
Thank you, T. I think you have some really beautiful visions for what you want to see, and really beautiful visions of justice. And I know that you have the leadership capabilities to make those dreams become realities. Thank you for speaking to the intersections between gender justice and environmental justice, especially as like the climate crisis continues to render women, femmes, and non-gender conforming folks to like especially vulnerable, right? It's not a conversation that's had enough, and I thank you for bringing that into the space. With the few minutes that we have left, I have another question posed to all of our panelists, and maybe this time we can go in opposite order just to switch things up. So T, if you don't mind popping back on, and you could share with us what gives you hope for the future.
Honestly, this is super cliche, but what gives me hope is kids my age speaking up and like leading organizations in their communities. It fills me with a lot of joy that there's people out there that actually care, even when things are like, going to crap and it gets overwhelming. I just always remember that there's other people who care about the stuff I care about, and that it's important to focus on the good as well.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I want to echo the chat. Like, you give us hope as well, T. So just know that that is absolutely reciprocated. Peggy, would you like to share with us what gives you hope for the future?
Yes. What gives me hope is that there is some new consciousness and understanding of the social justice nature of environmental justice and the importance in creating sustainable communities. And what gives me hope is just emerging leaders like you, Kevin, and like Miss Monica, Miss Monica, and so many others, that there are going to be people to take the place of those of us who've been doing this for a long time, and that I'm hoping that this new generation will be mentoring a newer and younger generation, because we know that it's the new generations that will have to really deal with the impacts of climate change and those impacts on the most vulnerable communities. So what gives me hope is the youth consciousness, the youth mobilization, and their ambition to really help control and sustain the health and safety of their communities.
Thank you. Oh, hit my laptop. Thank you for sharing that with us, Peggy. And also thank you for your words of confidence in myself and in other folks. That really means a lot. In our last couple minutes here, want to make sure I have time for Monica and Ben to share as well. So Monica, would you like to tell us what gives you hope for the future?
Yeah, I think conversations like these give me hope. I was like messaging and just saying, like, really felt like today, like this time for self-reflection and in this intergenerational space as well. That is like giving me a lot of hope for like even just for the next day. But yeah, I also say like just resiliency that the grassroots have shown that communities that have been suffering for a very long time at the hands of like climate disaster and just all of the root causes. Like there's been a lot of challenges posed to organizing this year in this past year, especially with organizing virtually, obviously COVID with us not really being able to just reach out and touch each other and like connect in the same way. And I just see like a real thirst and hunger to not go back to what the normal ways have been. And I feel like those have been demonstrated like through this, the example of the like, Oregon Clean Energy campaign. And, I think that's an example of like really good strategy inside and out. And so, I think like choosing to stay focused even in the midst of like adversity and just the ways that folks have been creative to some of these roadblocks that life has posed for all of us really inspires and just gives me a lot of hope. So just appreciating everybody for all of the things that have been shared today and being able to share space with the panelists as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Monica. We are incredibly grateful to have you here. In our last moments, I'll pass it to Ben quickly since we're running out of time. But Ben, sure.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I mean, I would say a lot of the same things that other folks, when I think about YEJA, I've had the privilege to work with the Vulnerable Youth Commission. When I think about Momentum Alliance and other youth organizations, and I look at the folks on this call. But I think for me, what gives me the most hope probably is, I've seen time and time again, that when some of us old heads get out of the way and find different pathways and ways to support the next generation that are taking it to the next level, that are being more sophisticated. They're taking those tactics and expanding them. I feel great hope because y'all are taking it to the next level. And the conversations that we're having now are not the conversations that I was having in the 90s. I think you heard that tonight around some of the intersectional, of gender justice and disability justice, climate justice that is just much more sophisticated than I feel like it was when I was coming up. So, it's going to be you, Kevin, and folks like T and others that are going to carry the baton forward.
Big virtual round of applause to all of our wonderful panelists. Thank you all so much for sharing your stories and your time with us. I'm incredibly grateful for this space. So props to you. Finally, I'll pass it to our organizing director, Lee, to finish us up for this evening.
Yes, thank you so much, Kevin. And thank you also, of course, to T, Monica, Peggy, and Ben for that amazing discussion. Y'all bring such a breadth of experience and stories, and we just cannot appreciate you all enough for bringing your knowledge and wisdom here tonight. We're about to wrap up, but I do want to leave you all with some ways to continue to stay connected to this work and this movement. As Kevin said, my name is Lee Helfand. I use they, them pronouns, and I am OPAL's organizing director. Our communities and all of us here tonight hopefully understand that environmental justice is transportation justice and racial justice and economic justice and gender justice. And EJ is really all of this as well as housing justice. And that's why OPAL will be bringing on additional organizers, including a community organizer who specifically addresses inequities and displacement at the intersections of housing and environmental justice. There are a ton of ways you can stay involved with OPAL's work. Right now, Bus Riders Unite is working to shift funding from policing towards community models of care like rider ambassadors. Our most targeted community members deserve safe transit and public resources that no longer exposes them to police violence. BRU members have already had success in advocating for a pilot program through the Portland streetcar, and we're working on expanding this model across the entire region. Additionally, the decades-long fight for YouthPass continues. We are working with coalition partners and Youth Environmental Justice Alliance members to ensure youth have a way to move around the region, to get to school, to access opportunities, and to get back home safely. But this time, we plan on taking it directly to voters as a standalone item. In 2022, we will pass a ballot initiative to guarantee this increased access. And we need each of you here tonight to get involved and stay involved. Reach out directly. My email is here on the screen to learn more about how you and others can fight for EJ values. Connect community groups you're a part of to OPAL's work to educate them about how they can aid in our advocacy efforts. Join our monthly coalition tables. Follow our social media to plug into programs like Serve the People this summer and organizers in training. Sign up to volunteer for the YouthPass campaign. And of course, this very important organizing work is only possible with your financial support. Look out for an email from us about how you can make a gift. And once again, thank you all for joining us this evening. We look forward to continuing to be in community with you all, and please have a good rest of your night. Thank you so much.